今天的内容是美国历史第三部分，也就是20世纪的这段时间，主要发生的事件有一战、二战、冷战、民权运动，还有911事件。好 ，World War One Wilson 威尔逊总统引领的一战。World War One began in 1914 and ended in 1918. 一战从1914年打到1918年。The United States worked with Britain, France, and Italy. They were called the Allied Powers. 美国、英国、法国和意大利被统称为同盟国。The Allied Powers defeated the Central Powers. The Central Powers were Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. 然后同盟国打败了轴心国，轴心国就是德国、奥地利匈牙利和奥斯曼帝国。Woodrow Wilson was the president during the World War I. He helped organize the surrender of Germany at the end of the war. Woodrow Wilson 是一战时候的总统，然后也算是安排了德国的后事。好，然后跟大家强调一遍，灰白底，然后黑色的字的是公民知识问答里面的内容，其他都是背景知识。第一个问题 ，Name one war fought by the United States in the 1900s。说出一个美国在20世纪打的仗。答案是 World War One， 其实 World War Two 也是啊。Who was president during World War I? 一战时的总统是谁？答案是 Woodrow Wilson。Woodrow Wilson。威尔逊。翻篇儿到Great Depression and Roosevelt。经济大萧条和罗斯福。World War I ended in 1918. 一战打到1918年。By 1929, the stock market crashed and began an economic crisis. 1929年的时候呢，股票又崩盘了，然后成为了一次经济危机的导火索。We call this period the Great Depression, 史称经济大萧条。Roosevelt, known as FDR, created the New Deal,a program that created jobs, benefits, and financial security for workers across the country. 罗斯福也叫 FDR， 他开启了罗斯福新政，产生工作机会，然后给工人津贴，还有社保的这样一个新的政策，也就是拉动内需以及使美国从经济萧条中恢复过来的一个原因。Under his leadership, Social Security was established in 1935. 1935年也是他创立了社保制度。In 1941, Roosevelt led the United States into World War II. 1941年也是罗斯福带领美国走向二战。Who was president during the Great Depression and World War II? 经济大萧条和二战时期的总统是谁？答案是 Franklin Roosevelt。World War II， 二战。Germany was also in an economic downfall after being defeated in World War I. 德国作为战败国在一战之后也很不好过This depression led to the rise of Hitler and his Nazi regime in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. 所以人民把希望差不多也是寄托在了希特勒和他的纳粹党派身上。In 1941, the United States entered World War II after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. 1941年，美国加入二战，在日本对珍珠港的袭击之后。Japan, Italy, and Germany declared war on the United States. 然后意大利、德国，同时也对美国宣战。 While Hitler's slaughter of Jewish people is often the main focus of historical account of World War I, the United States fought Japan, Germany, and Italy during World War II. 这应该写错了，应该是二战，不是一战。历史上我们会把二战的重心很多都放在希特勒对于犹太人的屠杀上，同时我们也要知道，美国在二战中打了3个国家，一共是日本、德国和意大利。然后就到了正好引出这个问题 Who did the United States fight in World War II? 答案是 Japan, Germany, and Italy. 日本、德国、意大利。OK, Eisenhower 也是一个总统的名字啊。Eisenhower was a general in World War II. Eisenhower 是二战的时候一个统领。He led the successful D-Day invasion of Normandy, France in 1944. 1944年，他引领了胜利日那天的诺曼底登陆。The D-Day invasion is important because prior to this invasion, Hitler's armies had been in control of most of mainland Europe, and the success of this invasion was central to the United States and its allies winning the war. 所以胜利日的诺曼底登陆之所以重要，是因为在此之前，希特勒对欧洲大陆已经有了基本上所有的掌控，然后也就是说，没有诺曼底登陆，可能也没有二战胜利。Due to his successful record, Eisenhower was elected president in 1952. 由于功勋累累啊，所以1925年他被当选成了总统。Before he was president, Eisenhower was a general. What war was he in? 在他成为总统之前 ，Eisenhower 是一个统领他打了哪一场战争？答案是 World War II 二战。好，翻篇儿 Cold War, Communism, Nuclear Arms Race, 冷战、共产主义和核军备竞赛。After World War II, the period known as Cold War began. This was not a war, but a period of tension between the Eastern countries and the Western countries. 二战之后，冷战开始。它也不是一个真刀实枪的战争吧，而是一段就是国际关系特别紧张的时间，主要是在东方国家和西方国家之间。It was a competition over principles and nuclear weapons. 主要他们就是有一些政治形态上的竞争，还有就是核武器上的军备竞赛。The Soviet Union, USSR, was a powerful nation with communist principles. In contrast, the United States and its allies had democratic governments and capitalist economies. 所以当时的前苏联是一个强而有力的共产主义国家。反之呢，美国和它的这些同盟国啊，都是民主政府和资本主义经济。The United States believed that the spread of communism threatens its democracy and capitalism. This was the main concern for the United States during the Cold War. 所以美国很担心共产主义威胁到了它的民主和资本主义，这是冷战的主要原因。Countries also competed to build the most powerful nuclear arms and militaries during this time. 所以呢，每个国家都争相要有最先进的核武器，还有最大的军队。During the Cold War, what was the main concern of the United States? 答案是 communism. 在冷战的期间，美国最大的忧虑是什么？答案是 communism, 共产主义。Civil rights movements, 民权运动。Slavery may have legally ended in 1865, but African Americans in the United States continued to be legally discriminated against and looked down on as less than by white Americans, who has all the power and wealth. 确实，1865年来呢，蓄奴制是不合法了，但是不代表，他们就没有，美国黑人就没有受到各种来自于白人的歧视。然后由于种族之间的阶级流动性不是特别大，所以这时所有的权利和金钱也都掌握在白人手里。Up until 1954, racial segregation was legal. In 1954, the Supreme Court ruled the racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. 一直到1954年，种族隔离都是合法的。然后1954年的时候，美国最高法院宣布，在所有的公立学校里面不可以进行种族隔离。Fighting for change, people held bus boycotts, sit-ins, marches, and protests to demand change. 为了社会进步，所以有很多种形式的抗议都发生了。As a result of this call to action, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 made segregation in public facilities and racial discrimination in employment and education illegal. 所以1964年出台的民权法案，在所有公共场合下的种族隔离，还有工作和教育方面的种族歧视都不合法了。The Voting Rights Act of 1965 banned any special requirement that had been used to stop African Americans from registering for a vote. Today we see the civil rights movement continues. 1965年的投票法案也是废除了所有让黑人不能投票的这些特殊要求。然后民权运动也是一直流传到今天。Here's a look at a timeline and some pictures from slavery to segregation. As you can see, the protests against racial justice in the 1950s resemble the pushback occurring today. 这边是美国历史的一个时间线吧，就1619年到1865年是蓄奴，1865年到1954年是种族隔离，就是你能看到，就这绿色就这么一茬儿。What movement tried to end racial discrimination? 哪项运动尝试断绝种族隔离？答案是 Civil Rights Movement 民权运动。然后这边是一个 Martin Luther King Jr. 的演讲的一个链接，我待会儿会放在视频底下。As the video pictures demonstrate, protests and rallying is a part of civil rights historically and has led to great change in this country. Today we see people doing the same, protesting racial injustice to force structural and cultural change. 然后刚刚那个视频里面有很多讲的都是他们的抗议如何带来了社会进步的，也是我们的老师觉得现在我们进行的民权运动和他当时的理念一脉相承。The protests of the 50s lead to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, just as the protests of today are leading to cities reallocating funds from the police to social programs. 50年代的抗议呢，导致了1964年民权法案的通过。然后我们的老师觉得，我们今天的这些抗议，也导致了就城市把资金从颈部转移到各种社会项目。怎么说呢？我们10年之后再看吧。Martin Luther King Jr. worked with a number of civil rights and religious groups to organize the March on Washington for jobs and freedom, a peaceful political rally designed to shed light on the injustices African Americans continue to face across the country. 你看上面这两幅图啊 ，Martin Luther King Jr. 是他引领了在华盛顿的这个这一次和平抗议啊 ，held on August 28th and attended by some 200,000 to 300,000 participants. The event is widely regarded as a watershed movement in the history of the American Civil Rights Movement and a factor in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 这场和平抗议，我记得是1963年发生的，也是民权运动导致最终运动成功的一个分水岭阶段吧。Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. 他在1968年4月4号的时候被暗杀了，但起码他见证了自己梦想的部分成功吧。What did Martin Luther King Jr. do? Martin Luther King Jr. 做了什么 ？Fought for civil rights. 争取民权。On September 11th, 2001, two planes crashed into the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in New York City. 2001年9月11号，两架飞机撞入了美国纽约的双子塔。Both buildings were destroyed. Another plane crashed into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. 两栋楼都被摧毁了，然后有另外一架飞机撞进了美国五角大楼。The final and the fourth plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. Almost 3,000 people died in these attacks, most civilians. 第四架飞机撞进了宾夕法尼亚的一个农田里面，然后加起来，将近3000人死于这次恐怖袭击，并且几乎全都是平民。What major event happened on September 11th, 2001 in the United States? 2001年9月11号，在美国发生了哪次大事件？答案是 Terrorists attacked the United States. 恐怖分子袭击美国。好，今天的课就到这里，拜拜。